Imagine standing on a really crowded, sun-baked dock in Lombok.
Oh, just completely burned out by the traffic.
Exactly. The noise of modern tourism is just everywhere. So you pull up a map on your phone, you look east, and you see this massive, rugged island just sitting there.
Just waiting.
Yeah. You do a quick search and discover that the ferry to get there costs literally $2.
Which sounds insane.
Right. $2 to escape the crowds and find untouched paradise. I mean, it sounds like the ultimate travel cheat code.
It really does.
But well, what the internet doesn't tell you is that this $2 ticket is about to cost you 10 hours of your life.
Oh, yeah.
And hundreds of dollars in private car hires just to reach a bed. Welcome to the Phil and H Travel Podcast. Is it worth it?
Today, we are pointing our compass toward a highly debated, deeply misunderstood Indonesian island. We're talking about Sumbawa.
Sumbawa. And before we get into the weeds, I have to give you this warning. If you're planning a trip and want the honest, is it worth it verdict before you book, follow the show on Spotify or Apple.
Because today, we are stripping away the drone photography.
We really are. We're looking at the raw elements here. I mean, we have 2 domestic airports to navigate, a handful of very confusing ferry ports, legendary surf bases.
Year-round whale sharks, too.
Yes. Towering mountain routes, and the thing that catches everyone off guard, severely limited facilities.
Which establishes the stakes for this entire deep dive. Sumbawa is not, I repeat, not a plug-and-play beach holiday.
No, absolutely not.
You don't just book a flight, walk out of the terminal, and let a network of concierges and taxi drivers ferry you around.
Yeah, that doesn't exist there.
Right. This destination actively demands a high tolerance for physical and logistical friction. If you're someone who needs an easy nightlife strip, highly reliable transport, or, that seamless resort bubble where the Wi-Fi never drops.
And everyone speaks perfect English.
Exactly. If you need that, skip Sumbawa. Stop looking at it. It will break your heart and your patience.
It'll just ruin your trip.
But if you're chasing empty, world-class waves, incredible marine life, and you actually enjoy the puzzle of navigating a place that hasn't adapted to mass tourism, keep listening.
Okay, let's unpack this. Specifically the phrase that keeps popping up in all of our sources. The next Bali.
Oh, I hate that phrase.
It drives me crazy. Someone finds a stretch of white sand with no footprints, snaps a photo, and slaps the next Bali label on it.
Yeah, it happens constantly.
But I want to make a very blunt claim today. Sumbawa is absolutely not the next Bali. In fact, it is exactly what travelers claim they want when they complain about over-tourism, but when they actually get there, it's a reality they fundamentally cannot handle.
The gap between the romanticized idea of an untouched island and the operational reality is just staggering.
Right.
People crave the empty beaches, but they forget that untouched also means there are no supply chains to bring you cold imported beer.
Or like no ATMs when you run out of cash.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It means the roads connecting those beautiful beaches are deeply unforgiving.
I was thinking about how to explain this, and it reminds me of the fantasy of buying a vintage car.
Oh, that's a good comparison.
Right. You see a pristine 1968 convertible on social media. It looks effortlessly cool. You picture yourself cruising down the coast at sunset.
Wind in your hair.
Exactly.
Yep.
But what you don't realize until you buy it is that owning a vintage car means you have to become a mechanic.
Yep. You're constantly under the hood.
It doesn't have power steering. The air conditioning is non-existent. It overheats if you sit in traffic. And if a belt snaps on a rural back road, you can't just call roadside assistance.
You have to fix it yourself.
With whatever tools you have in the trunk. Sumbawa is that vintage car. It is breathtakingly beautiful. Yeah. But you cannot hand the keys to a valet. You have to do the work.
That analogy holds up perfectly, especially when you look at the sheer scale of the maintenance required. Our geographic data completely shatters most travelers' preconceived notions here.
It's massive, right?
To understand Sumbawa, you have to understand its footprint. It is larger than the island of Bali and the island of Lombok combined.
Wait, really? Let me stop you there because I want that to really sink in for you listening.
Yeah.
Take the entire tourism machine of Bali Bay. Every beach club, every volcano, every rice terrace.
All of it?
Now mash it together with the entirety of Lombok. Sumbawa is still physically bigger than both of them put together.
And yet, despite being so massive, the infrastructure is so sparse that your entire trip has to revolve around just a few specific geographic anchors.
Like the surf spots.
Yeah, you have the surfing hotspots in the southeast around Huyu and Lakey Peak, In the center north, you have Saleh Bay, which is the staging ground for the whale sharks.
Oh, wow.
You have the massive dominating presence of Mount Tambora, the volcano that famously erupted in 1815.
Yeah.
And crucially, you have the two domestic airports, one in the central west at Sumbawa Besar and one in the east at Bima.
So you have to pick your anchor carefully.
If you don't pin your trip securely to one of those anchors, you will spend your entire vacation lost in transit.
Which brings up the obvious question. If this place is so massive and so difficult to navigate, why is there such a huge surge of interest right now?
Why are we even talking about it?
Yeah, why are we dedicating an entire deep dive to it?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the catalyst isn't actually happening on Sumbawa at all. It's happening next door.
In Lombok.
Exactly. Lombok is currently in the middle of a multi-billion-dollar tourism push orchestrated by the government. They are heavily backing the Mandalika development project.
Which is huge.
It's not just a few new hotels. This is a deliberate, highly funded effort to create a new economic zone to rival Bali. We are seeing rapidly expanded domestic air connectivity.
Yeah, brand new direct flight routes bouncing straight from Bali to Lombok.
They're even finalizing a massive fast boat pier project in Bali's Senur Harbor that will shoot thousands of tourists directly to Mandalika in about 2 hours.
So Bali hits maximum capacity, the government builds a massive overflow pipe directly into Lombok, and suddenly Lombok starts feeling just as processed and dense as the place people were trying to escape.
Precisely. And the travelers who still desperately want that raw frontier feeling are being physically pushed further east.
Right. They look at the map, they see the development wave swallowing Lombok, and they realize the only logical next step is to take the ferry over to Poto Tano in West Sumbawa.
And when those displaced adventurers start researching Sumbawa, the first thing they see, the ultimate hook that pulls them in, is the pricing.
Oh my gosh, the pricing. I spent hours digging through Expedia and TripAdvisor for this deep dive, and the headline costs are genuinely shocking.
Give us some examples.
Okay, let me give you some specific anchors. You can find places like the Bail Baba Uyunutan coming in around $22 a night.
That's incredibly cheap.
The Amangati Hotel, which is right down near the legendary surf of Lakey Peak, is sitting around $28 a night. If you want to step up to what they consider mid-range, the Grand Samoa Hotel is about $39 a night.
And the resorts?
Even the places calling themselves resorts look like a pricing error compared to Bali. The Sofanda Resort in Nangamiro is roughly $61. The Motion Beach Resort is around $86.
Wow, under $100.
Yeah, and the Kirina Retreat, which leans into that rustic luxury vibe, is about $94 a night. If you widen the net to TripAdvisor, they're proudly advertising stays from $11 across 134 different properties.
I know exactly what goes through a traveler's mind when they see those numbers. You feel like a genius.
You do.
You feel like you've unlocked a secret travel cheat code where you can get a 2-week tropical holiday for the price of a weekend in Miami.
But I have to throw up a massive red flag right here.
Here.
This is our first major skip-if warning of the deep dive. Do not look at those $11 prices. Pull up a map and assume you can conquer this island on a whim.
Please don't.
If your trip is under 1 week and you have this grand vision of seeing the waterfalls of Moyo Island, diving with the whale sharks in Saleh Bay, hiking Mount Tambora, and catching the sunset surf at Lakey Peak all in one sweep, skip Sumbawa entirely.
You absolutely have to skip it because attempting that itinerary in 7 days is geographically impossible. It will break you.
So what does this all mean? If we can't do the greatest hits tour in a week, how do we actually approach this giant vintage car of an island?
How do we break it down?
Right. How do we break it down into something a normal human can actually execute?
This is where we have to completely dismantle what I call the map illusion. This is the single biggest point of failure for people planning this trip.
Because maps lie.
Exactly. When you look at Sumbawa on a digital map, it looks fairly linear. It's this long strip of land stretching from west to east. The human brain naturally assumes you can treat it like a road trip down the coast of California.
You know, you start on the left, you drive to the right, and you stop at cool places along the way.
Right. It looks like a simple line connecting Poto Tano to Saleh Bay, but you're telling me that line is a lie.
Wait, I'm telling you.
Sorry. I mean, the data tells us that line is a complete fiction created by looking at a map from 30,000 feet. The physical topography of the island, the massive mountains, the deep bays that cut miles inland, and the severe lack of paved infrastructure completely shatters that linear illusion. I want you to stop picturing a straight line and start picturing a dumbbell.
A dumbbell. Okay, paint that picture for me.
Think of a heavy weight on the left side, a heavyweight on the right side, and a very thin, very strained bar connecting them. Sumbawa operates in three highly distinct, heavily isolated zones.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, you have the west. This is where the ferry from Lombok drops you at Poto Tano. It encompasses Sumbawa Barat and a specific cluster of surf stays.
And the center.
The center is the first heavy side of the dumbbell. It is anchored by the main city of Sumbawa Besar, the port of Labuhan Badas, Moyo Island, and the access routes into Saleh Bay for the whale sharks.
And then the east.
Finally, you have the east. This is the other heavy side of the dumbbell. It is anchored by the city of Bima, the surf culture at Huyu and Lakey Peak, and the Sape ferry terminal if you are continuing your journey eastward into Flores.
And because of that dumbbell shape and the terrible roads connecting them, you cannot easily jump between the west, the center, and the east.
It's just not practical.
Which brings us to the most critical logistical choice you will make, the airports.
Sumbawa has two completely separate domestic airports, serving those two heavy sides of the dumbbell. You have Sultan Mohammed Khafruddin Airport, which sits in Sumbawa Besar and serves the central and western zones.
Okay.
And then, hundreds of kilometers away, you have Sultan Salahuddin Airport in Bima, which serves the eastern zone. Your entire itinerary is dictated by which tarmac you land on.
We are going to dive incredibly deep into the trap of picking the wrong airport shortly, because it is financially and emotionally devastating.
It really is.
But first, let's talk about timing. Before you pick an airport, you have to pick a month. When should you actually subject yourself to this level of logistical friction?
The climate data gives us a very clear window. The best overall time to attempt this island is during the drier season, which runs from May through November.
May through November?
Yeah. If your specific anchor is Sumbawa Besar in the central zone, some of the local guides recommend tightening that window even further to May through September to ensure the best ride conditions.
I'm looking at the flip side of that data, and the period from November through March looks brutal. That's the rainy season.
And we need to define what rainy season actually means in a place that lacks modern infrastructure.
Right, it's not just a shower.
In Bali, rainy season means you sit in a nice cafe for an hour while a thunderstorm passes over Canggu. In Sumbawa, rainy season is a logistical collapse.
Because there's no backup system.
Exactly the opposite of seamless. The domestic airlines, which already run on incredibly thin margins with limited aircraft, start delaying or canceling flights when the visibility drops.
And the roads.
The mountain roads, which are often just single lanes of crumbling asphalt shared with massive logging trucks, become slick, muddy, or completely wash out.
Oh, that sounds terrifying.
And crucially, if you are relying on small local boats to reach Moyo Island or cross Saleh Bay, the sea swells make those journeys highly vulnerable to disruption.
That leaves us with the shoulder seasons.
Oh.
April, May, October, and November. The sources point out that May and October can be fantastic value plays. You get decent weather without the peak mid-year traveler bump.
Yes.
But November carries a massive warning label.
November is the gamble. The seasons are shifting, the ocean swells become highly unpredictable, and the storms start rolling in.
So you could just get stuck.
If you have booked a tight itinerary that relies on a small wooden boat taking you to a remote eco-resort in November, you are exposing yourself to a high probability that the boat captain will simply look at the sky, shake his head, and refuse to take you.
And you will be stranded on the dock.
Stranded because there are no crowds. And here's where it gets really interesting. The entire marketing pitch for Sumbawa is that it is empty. No crowds, no tourist buses, no lines.
Sounds nice in theory.
But what's fascinating here is how fundamentally travelers misunderstand the economics of an empty destination.
We've been conditioned by glossy travel magazines to believe that low crowds automatically guarantee a superior, more authentic holiday.
Right.
Our sources from rough guides lean heavily into this, framing Sumbawa as this wondrously obscure alternative with beaches completely empty compared to the density of Bali.
But you have to understand the mechanism of a tourism economy. Low crowds equal low commercial support.
I really want you to think about what low support looks like on the ground. If an island only sees a trickle of tourists, there's no financial incentive for a local entrepreneur to open a nice, air-conditioned restaurant near the beach.
There is no incentive to run a reliable taxi company.
You will not find English speakers waiting around to help you solve problems. If your fast boat breaks down in Bali, you walk 10 minutes down the beach and hire another one because the volume of tourists supports dozens of boat operators.
In Sumbawa, if your driver doesn't show up, there is no competitor waiting to take his place. You're just stuck.
That is the ultimate trade-off of frontier travel. You are exchanging convenience for isolation.
And because of that brutal reality, the way you book your trip has to fundamentally change depending on what kind of traveler you are. Your booking timeline has to match your specific persona.
Let's run through these personas because the strategies are wildly different. Let's start with the surfers. You are chasing the famous breaks at Lakey Peak or Huyu. How do you plan this?
For the surfers, the accommodation actually comes second. Your very first booking decision is your flight, specifically the logistics of getting your board bag on the plane.
Oh, because of the tiny planes?
Right. Domestic Indonesian airlines operating small propeller planes have incredibly strict, often unpredictable rules about oversized luggage. You have to secure the transport for your boards first, or the trip is ruined. Once the flight is locked, then you book the room.
And looking at the sources, a place like Lakey Peak Haven is the gold standard for that persona. It's highly specialized. They only have 13 rooms. They have a pool to recover in. And most importantly, they explicitly advertise Starlink Internet.
Which tells you exactly how bad the local cell towers are if a hotel uses a satellite dish as a primary selling point.
Now, what about the divers or the people who want to lock themselves in a remote resort?
For them, the methodology is reverse. You book the resort first and you build the entire logistical puzzle around it because the resort is the destination.
Like Moyo Island Resort.
Take the Moyo Island Resort. It has direct diving access, its own pool, its own spa. It is an island within an island. You secure your dates there first, and then you figure out whatever combination of flights and private boat charters are required to reach it. Securing the room is paramount.
I want to talk about families next. I'm looking at this map, I'm thinking about the heat and the lack of hospitals, and I'm wondering how a family even attempts this.
Families operate under a zero-tolerance policy for friction. You must book your trip based entirely on the easiest airport access and the shortest possible land transfers.
You don't book based on aesthetics.
Right. You do not book based on an incredible drone photo of a hidden waterfall that requires a 3-hour hike. You book based on logistics.
What about the budget overlanders? The backpackers who have more time than money.
They're the only persona who can afford to play it loose. They don't need rigid, pre-booked schedules. But what they do need in exchange is massive amounts of patience, the physical stamina to sit on local buses, and a lot of physical cash hidden in their backpacks.
Finally, we have the people who just need to use Sumbawa Besar as a transit hub for a night or two before moving on.
That is the easiest booking on the island. You look for practical, functional city hotels. The Grand Samoda, which we mentioned earlier for around $39, is a perfect example. You book it online, it has air conditioning, it has a bed, and you move on the next day.
But regardless of whether you are a surfer, a family, or a backpacker, our sources highlight one universal, unbreakable rule of booking. Do not, under any circumstances, try to chain an international arrival into Bali or Lombok directly to a ferry crossing, directly to an overland transfer, and directly to a remote beach check-in all in a single 24-hour period.
That is a recipe for a psychological meltdown. You are assuming that 5 completely separate, highly fragile transport systems in a developing nation will all operate perfectly on schedule.
Which they won't.
The moment one link breaks, a delayed flight, a missed ferry, the entire chain collapses and you are sleeping on your luggage in a ferry terminal.
And that reality check hits you the very second you try to step foot on the island. Which brings us to the actual experience of arriving. Let's talk about first impressions and the mechanics of getting there.
Let's assume you take the sea route.
Yeah. You've landed in Lombok, you drive east, and you arrive at Kayangan Port to catch the ferry over to Poto Tano in West Sumbawa. The local guides tell us there are regular departures, and the crossing itself takes roughly an hour and a half to 2 hours.
This ferry crossing is a masterclass in setting expectations. It is the physical threshold where you leave the comfortable, processed tourism bubble of Lombok behind, and you step into the reality of a working industrial Indonesian transport network. You are sharing the deck with cargo trucks, motorbikes, and local traders.
And the cost is almost comical. The listed passenger fare is about 25,000 rupiah. That is roughly $2 US.
Unbelievable.
Now, I have to push back here. When someone hears $2 for a ferry to paradise, it sounds entirely effortless. Why did we just spend the last 20 minutes talking about how grueling the logistics are if the boat ride costs less than a cup of coffee?
Because the $2 ticket is a distraction. It only covers the 90 minutes you are physically floating on the water. It completely ignores the staggering friction of the land on either side of that water.
Explain the mechanism.
Think about the mechanism of this journey. First, you land at the international airport in Lombok. Kaiman Port is on the absolute opposite side of that island. That is a long, hot drive just to reach the ferry. Then you pay your $2, you cross the strait, and you step off the boat at Poto Tano.
And where exactly is Poto Tano?
It is on the extreme western tip of Sumbawa. You are standing on the far edge of the dumbbell. You are nowhere near the city infrastructure of Sumbawa Besar.
Or the whale sharks.
Right. You are hours away from the whale sharks in Saleh Bay. And you are practically in a different time zone from the surf breaks at Lakey Peak. That $2 ferry leaves you stranded on the wrong side of a massive island with no public transport waiting to whisk you away.
So the ticket is cheap, but the cost in time, fatigue, and the subsequent private car hires you need to actually get anywhere interesting is massive. Let's look at the alternative. What if we just bypass the ocean and fly?
The data from Romatorio provides a very stark contrast. You can board a direct domestic flight from Lombok International Airport and fly straight into the center of the island at Sumbawa Besar. The flight time is roughly 40 minutes.
And the cost?
The ticket prices fluctuate, but they generally range from $60 to $125.
Okay, 40 minutes in the air. What does that exact same journey look like on the ground?
If you hire a private car in Lombok, drive to the port, wait for the car ferry, cross the water, and then drive from Poto Tano to Sumbawa Besar. Assuming perfect traffic and no ferry delays, you're looking at a minimum of 4 hours. If you try to do it via public buses, switching vehicles at the ports, you are looking at 6 to 8 hours of exhausting travel.
So you are trading 6 hours of heat, dust, and diesel fumes for 40 minutes in an air-conditioned cabin. Suddenly, spending $100 on a domestic flight doesn't just look like an option, it looks like the most vital investment of your entire trip.
Absolutely. And if you need to go from the Sumbawa airports back to Lombok, the general range is highly affordable, roughly $35 to $100.
But flying introduces its own danger, which we touched on earlier.
I call it the simplicity trap.
Walk me through that. How does a 40-minute flight become a trap?
Because buying a flight on your phone feels so easy, it lulls you into a false sense of security. You open a booking app, you type in Sumbawa, you see a cheap flight to Sumbawa Besar, and you buy it.
But you didn't check the geography.
Exactly. Your actual hotel booking is a surf lodge near Bima in the Far East. You land in Sumbawa Besar feeling great, you step out of the terminal, and you realize you are still an 8-hour, brutal mountain drive away from your bed.
Yeah.
You tried to buy simplicity, but because you didn't understand the dumbbell geography, you just bought yourself a massive road trip.
And that moment stepping out of the airport or off the ferry is when the culture shock truly hits. And I want to be fair to the island, this culture shock has two faces. There is a deeply positive side to it.
Absolutely. If you arrive in a place like Sumbawa Besar, the main hub in the center west, the vibe is incredibly refreshing. It is remarkably safe. It operates at a very low-key, unhurried pace.
It's cheap, right?
And the economics are fantastic for a traveler. You can live very comfortably on $12 to $25 a day for your basic food and movement. You have access to local homestays, a bustling central market full of fresh produce, and a town square where families gather in the evenings. It feels deeply authentic because it isn't performing for tourists.
But the negative side of that culture shock hits just as fast, usually the moment you need something done quickly.
Right, because it isn't performing for tourists. There is zero dense tourist support.
If you are used to Bali, where a quick tap on an app summons a driver with a clean car and a cold bottle of water, you are in for a rude awakening. There is no Apple Pay. There are no boutique pharmacies on every corner.
No clinics.
Yeah, if you sprain your ankle or get a terrible stomach bug, there is no pristine, English-speaking medical clinic waiting to patch you up with an IV drip.
This raises an important philosophical point about how we judge developing destinations. When Western travelers encounter this lack of infrastructure, they often get frustrated, as if the island is failing them.
Right, like they're doing a bad job.
But it's not a moral failing. Sumbawa isn't doing anything wrong. The locals have built a society that functions perfectly well for their needs. It is simply the reality of a secondary island economy. It was not engineered to cater to our specific, highly demanding leisure preferences.
So we've made it. We've navigated the ports, we've avoided the simplicity trap of the wrong airport, and we've accepted that we are far outside the tourist bubble. The most pressing question now is, where do we actually sleep?
Good question.
Because your choice of a home base here dictates the entire flow of your trip. Let's break down the accommodation strategies by persona. I want to start with the backpackers.
For the backpacker demographic, the island essentially forces you into one of two strategic bases. You either plant yourself in Sumbawa Besar, using it as a transit hub and a launch pad for day trips out to places like Moyo Island, Or, if your sole purpose is surfing, you bypass the cities entirely and base yourself at Lakey Peak.
And if we look back at those Expedia prices, this is where they actually make sense. The Baobaba Uyunutan at roughly $22 a night, or the Amangati Hotel at $28.
They're basic.
Exactly. Why are they so cheap? Because they are basic, and they are located in areas where you can plug directly into the local economy.
Oh.
You can walk out the door, eat at a local market, and catch a shared public bus.
Yeah.
You aren't paying a premium for isolation.
Exactly. The backpacker budget works because they adopt the local friction, but the strategy has to shift dramatically when we look at mid-range couples.
This is where I see people making huge mistakes. A couple has a decent budget, but they still want a deal. They look online and see a practical city hotel like the Grand Samoda for $39 a night.
Okay.
Then they look at a coastal spot like the Sofanda Resort for $61, and they think, well, the $39 room has AC and a bed. Let's just stay in the city and save the $20 a night. We can just take taxis to the beach.
And that thought process is a catastrophic miscalculation. I call it the mid-range mistake. You cannot chase the cheapest hotel room. You have to chase the correct geographic zone.
Why is that?
Think about the mechanism of their plan. If that couple's true goal is marine life, they want to snorkel or look for whale sharks, staying in a landlocked city hotel means they have to hire a private driver every single morning just to reach the coast.
Oh, I see.
That $20 they saved on the room is immediately vaporized by a $50 round-trip car hire. Worse, they are losing hours of their vacation to dead time, sitting in a hot vehicle on bumpy roads. In Sumbawa, you have to pay the premium for location.
What about the families? We established they need zero friction. How does that impact where they sleep?
Families have a completely different set of non-negotiable requirements. When a family looks at accommodation, they cannot be swayed by aesthetics. That incredibly rustic, beautiful bamboo hut on a deserted beach is a nightmare for a 6-year-old.
Definitely.
Families must choose properties based on two absolute pillars: transfer simplicity and reliable air conditioning.
You can find properties in that $39 to $94 mid-range bracket that fit the bill. But the crucial caveat is that families must interrogate the hotel before booking. You have to ensure the property functions as a closed loop.
They have to do everything.
Exactly. Can they guarantee an airport pickup with a safe vehicle? Do they have an on-site restaurant that serves reliable, safe food all day? If a family tries to improvise their independent movement across Sumbawa, trying to flag down a local driver in the midday heat with exhausted kids, the island will break their spirit. You're paying the hotel to manage your risk.
Which is the perfect segue into the luxury and comfort demographic.
Now, if you hear the word luxury and you immediately picture a sprawling St. Regis or a Four Seasons with golf carts and a dedicated butler, you need to radically recalibrate your expectations. Luxury in Sumbawa does not mean polished international brand standard.
No, it doesn't.
It is highly specialized, patchwork luxury. Take the Motion Beach Resort, coming in around $86 a night. It's not a mega resort. What you are actually buying at that price point are professional, certified dive masters and exclusive access to reefs that haven't been destroyed by mass tourism.
Or consider the Kirana retreat, sitting around $94 a night. The guest reviews highlight the architecture. It's constructed from straw, wood, and bamboo. It is the definition of rustic, barefoot luxury. It is stunningly beautiful, and it blends into the environment, but it is fundamentally exposed to the elements. It is not a hermetically sealed, climate-controlled box.
Okay, let's unpack this.
Yeah.
When we look across all these personas and price points, there is a massive underlying trap. I want to drill this into the listener's head. A cheap room on Sumbawa does not equal a cheap trip. You might feel incredibly smug booking that $11 room you found on TripAdvisor. But by the time you pay for a private driver, because there are no taxis, by the time you pay the oversized baggage fee for your surfboard, and by the time you are forced to eat every meal at an overpriced remote resort restaurant because there is literally no other building for 5 miles.
Yeah, that budget is gone.
Exactly. That seemingly brilliant budget equalizes with the expensive resorts very, very fast.
It is an economic law of gravity on remote islands. The friction always extracts its toll, either in cash or in time. And you touched on a vital point there, the remote restaurants. That is a perfect transition to the daily reality of keeping yourself fed. Because the lack of infrastructure doesn't just make travel hard, it completely dictates what you are allowed to put in your mouth.
Let's talk about the food, the groceries, and the etiquette of eating here.
Yeah.
I need to be brutally honest. If your idea of a vacation diet revolves around Kangoo-style cafe hopping, where you can stroll down the street and choose between a matcha latte, an acai bowl, or artisanal avocado toast,
Yeah.
you're going to starve in Sumbawa.
The culinary ecosystem here is deeply traditional and strictly functional. It revolves entirely around three pillars: the local wet markets, simple roadside warungs, and whatever your specific hotel happens to be cooking that day.
And Sumbawa Besar has the best options, right?
If you are based in the city of Sumbawa Besar, you actually have a wonderful hub. The Central Market is an incredible sensory experience. It's packed with fresh daily catches, vibrant spices, and local produce. And when the sun goes down, the town square transforms into a massive open-air dining space. That is your culinary center of gravity.
But what happens when you leave the city? What happens when you go chase that isolation on the coast?
That is where your grocery strategy requires almost military-level foresight, because out there are no international supermarkets. There are no convenience stores with brightly lit aisles of imported snacks. Before you leave Sumbawa Besar for a remote stay, you have to stockpile.
Stockpile what?
You must buy your heavy bottled water, your fresh fruit, your basic medical supplies like ibuprofen or antacids, and your physical cash reserves. Because once you leave the city limits, those things simply cease to exist.
The reality is that at a remote stay, you become a captive audience. Look at the Moyo Island resort. Every review mentions their on-site restaurant and room service. That isn't just a nice luxury perk, it is a vital survival mechanism, because you are on an island and there is no other kitchen for miles.
Same with the surf lodges.
The same goes for Lakey Peak Haven. They are explicitly noted for having a homegrown vegetable garden and a dedicated restaurant to keep the surfers fueled. If you don't like what they are cooking, you don't eat.
And being a captive audience fundamentally changes the math of your meals.
Yeah.
If you are in the city, eating at a local warung or the night market, the value is astonishing. You are generally looking at spending between $2 to $5 for a full, authentic meal.
But the moment you are out on the coast, sitting at your resort's solitary restaurant, those exact same ingredients are going to cost you between $6 and $15 a meal. Now, $15 is still cheap by Western standards, but compared to the street, it's a massive markup. Why the huge jump?
It's the cost of logistics. Think about the mechanism of getting a fresh tomato to Moyo Island.
It's not easy.
No, it has to be grown, transported to a market in Sumbawa Besar, bought by the resort staff, loaded onto a truck, driven to a port, loaded onto a small boat, shipped across the water, and then prepared in a kitchen running on an expensive diesel generator.
Oh, wow. So you're paying for the whole chain.
You aren't just paying for the tomato, you are paying for the entire fragile supply chain that brought it to you.
And while we're discussing interacting with the local food scene, whether you're in a bustling market or a quiet wallroom, we have to talk about etiquette. Sumbawa is significantly more conservative than the tourist hubs of Bali.
The social rules are straightforward, but they demand respect. First, dress modestly. If you are walking through a town or a market, cover your shoulders and knees. Keep the bikinis and board shorts strictly confined to the immediate beach or surf breaks.
Makes sense.
Second, always use your right hand when eating or handing money to someone. The left hand is culturally considered unclean. Third, always ask for permission before taking photographs of people.
I want to double down on that last point. Please, do not treat these working fishing villages and local markets as a decorative, exotic backdrop for your social media feed. These are people's actual lives and homes. Be a respectful guest, not a content creator on a set.
Beyond the social etiquette, there is a very rigid operational etiquette you have to master to survive here. Whenever you are dealing with local logistics, hiring a driver, chartering a small boat, you must confirm everything up front.
Get the price first.
You confirm the exact price before you get in the vehicle, you confirm the precise pickup time, and crucially, you establish a weather contingency plan. You literally have to ask, what happens if a storm rolls in tomorrow morning? Do I get a refund? Do we wait a day?
Or you'll be arguing on a dock.
Have that slightly uncomfortable conversation before you hand over a single rupiah, or you will end up in a very frustrating argument on a dock.
Okay, let's tally this all up. We have $2 street meals, $15 resort meals, $20 rooms, $100 flights, and an endless need for private drivers. What does the actual realistic daily math look like? How much money do you need to physically survive a day on this island? Let's break down the daily budget persona by persona, starting with the backpackers.
For a backpacker willing to embrace the friction, you are looking at a daily spend of $30 to $45.
Break that math down for me. How do they keep it that low?
It requires extreme discipline. It assumes they are staying in those $18 to $28 rooms we discussed. It assumes they are eating almost exclusively at local warungs, capping their food spend at $8 to $15 a day. It assumes they are moving around on slow, crowded public buses or renting a cheap scooter rather than hiring cars.
But there's a warning here.
But here is the critical warning for backpackers. Do not look at the $12 to $25 daily cost of living in the city of Sumbawa Besar and assume you can maintain that burn rate out at a remote surf base. The sheer cost of transport and the isolation premium will push you straight to that $45 ceiling.
What about the mid-range traveler?
For the mid-range demographic, the budget jumps significantly. You should expect to spend between $70 and $120 per person per day. If you are traveling as a couple, budget $160 to $220 combined per day.
That is a massive leap from $45. Where's all that extra money going?
It is going toward eliminating the worst of the friction. That budget accounts for staying in the $39.9 to $94 rooms that guarantee air conditioning and a private bathroom. Most importantly, it accounts for hiring private air-conditioned cars instead of sweating on a public bus with a chicken on your lap.
No chickens.
And it leaves room to pay for specific guided activities like chartering a boat to a reef every other day.
Then we hit the families. The daily budget here climbs to $180 to $320 a day. Now, I know some listeners are hearing $320 a day in rural Indonesia and thinking, my God, we must be living like absolute royalty for that price.
I need to dispel that illusion immediately. For a family, that $180 to $320 is not buying you silk sheets and caviar. It is buying you risk management.
You're paying for peace of mind.
You are paying a premium for operational reliability. You are paying for a dedicated private driver who actually has functional seatbelts in his car. You are paying for safe, consistent meals prepared in a hygienic kitchen so your kids don't spend 3 days sick in a bathroom.
Yeah, that's crucial.
Because of the extremely limited medical facilities, a family cannot afford to cut corners to save $10. You are buying the peace of mind that your logistics will not fail.
And if you do want that high-end experience, or at least the highest level of comfort this rugged island can provide, you enter the luxury bracket. This demands $250 to $500 plus US dollars per day. This is strictly for those specialist properties like the Moyo Island Resort or Motion Beach.
And we need to carefully define what constitutes good value versus bad value at this price point. Good value at $500 a day in Sumbawa means you are paying an eco-resort to act as a shield against the islanders' friction.
Right.
They manage the berth transfers, they maintain the dive gear, they generate the electricity, and they provide incredible access to untouched nature. Bad value is spending $500 a day and expecting mass-market Dubai-style luxury.
I don't expect Dubai.
If you expect a 24-hour concierge to summon a golf cart to whisk you to a branded beach club with international DJs, you will be bitterly disappointed because that infrastructure simply does not exist here.
Finally, we have to look at the digital nomads. The budget for a month-long stay is roughly $900 to $1,600 US dollars. This assumes you are establishing a long-term base in Sumbawa Besar for the infrastructure, or out at Lakey Peak, specifically hunting down properties like Lakey Peak Haven that explicitly offer Starlink.
But the risk profile for a digital nomad here is severe. Beyond the obvious internet vulnerabilities, there is virtually zero co-working density. There is no social infrastructure designed for remote workers to network or mingle.
It's very isolated.
You are not going to find a trendy cafe full of people on MacBooks. You are going to be working in isolation, either in your bedroom or at a solitary hotel restaurant table.
So when we look across all these budgets, from the $30 backpacker to the $500 luxury diver, what is the single most common financial mistake people make? What blows the budget?
Without fail, travelers drastically underestimate the cost of moving between those isolated zones, and they heavily underestimate their constant need for physical cash. The golden rule of value on Sumbawa is duration.
Staying put.
Staying for 10 days in one single zone is fantastic value. Attempting to sample the entire island, bouncing from Sumbawa Besar to Saleh Bay to Lakey Peak in 4 days is a catastrophic waste of money. You will bleed your budget dry paying for private logistical monopolies just to move you around.
And trying to race across the island at top speed usually leads travelers directly into one of the 3 major logistical nightmares we uncovered in our audit. Let's lay these out clearly so our listeners don't fall victim to them. These are the trip ruiners. Trap number 1, the 2 airport mistake. We touched on the geography earlier, but let's break down the actual mechanism of how this ruins your trip.
As we established, Sumbawa has 2 airports operating on opposite ends of the dumbbell. You have SWQ in the West Center, which is Sumbawa Besar, and you have BMU in the East, which is Bima.
The mistake happens at a laptop in a living room, thousands of miles away. It is so simple, but the fallout is devastating.
Yeah.
You look online, you see a cheap domestic flight to Sumbawa, and you click buy. You don't look at the three-letter airport code.
It's a classic error.
Your entire itinerary is built around seeing the whale sharks near Moyo Island, which requires you to be in the center. But the ticket you just bought lands at BMU, way out in the east.
The penalty for this lack of due diligence is steep. The moment you land, you have two terrible options. You either pull out your phone, assuming you have a signal, and pay $35 to $125 to completely rebook a new domestic flight to the correct airport. And that assumes there is a seat available on the tiny plane. Or you are forced to hire a private car and waste an entire day and a lot of cash driving overland across grueling mountain passes just to get back to where you were supposed to start.
The fix for trap number 1 is rigid and non-negotiable. If your anchor is Moyo Island or Sumbawa Besar, you must verify that your ticket says SWQ. If your anchor is the surf at Lakey Peak, Huyu, or the hike at Mount Tambora, you must verify your ticket says BMU. Check the code twice.
Trap number 2, the cheap ferry illusion.
Ah, the siren song of the $2 ferry from Kayangan to Poto Tano.
We've discussed the geography of this, but the mechanism of the trap is how it destroys your itinerary time. The ferry itself genuinely only costs $2 and takes roughly 90 minutes, but the land transfers required to reach the docks on both sides turn a quick ocean crossing into an exhausting 12-hour travel saga.
12 hours for a $2 ferry.
You have to navigate the traffic out of Lombok, wait in the heat at the port, take the ferry, arrive in the absolute middle of nowhere in West Sumbawa, and then endure hours of driving just to reach a functional town.
So what is the fix? How do we avoid the illusion?
The fix is a strict time equation. If your entire trip to Sumbawa is scheduled for under 7 days, you must completely ignore the ferry. Eat the $60 to $125 cost of the domestic flight. Do not take the ferry unless your specific, singular focus is exploring the extreme west coast of Sumbawa, or if you are a hardcore, long-term overlander who views sitting on a hot bus and a rusty ferry as an integral part of the adventure.
Trap number 3, the cache, connectivity, and remote service trap.
The mechanisms of modern seamless travel rely entirely on two invisible safety nets: our smartphones and our credit cards. In Sumbawa, those safety nets are frequently shredded. The ATMs at both the SWQ and BMU airports are notorious among travelers for being unreliable. They're often out of order, disconnected from the network, or simply emptied of cash by the locals.
I want you to picture the reality of this trap. You arrive at a remote beach resort, a 2-hour drive from the nearest actual town. You want to tip your driver, but you have no physical cash. You want to pull up a digital map to see where you are, but your phone says no service.
Total nightmare.
You want to pay for a bottle of water at a local shack, but they obviously don't take Apple Pay. Being completely cut off from your money and your data in an unfamiliar place is a fast track to a panic attack.
The fix for Trap 3 is mandatory paranoid preparation. You must physically carry at least 2 days' worth of cash in small denominations on your person before you leave the airport or the major city. You must download all your maps for offline use before you arrive on the island.
And contact the hotel.
And crucially, you must email or message your accommodation before you finalize the booking to explicitly confirm their Wi-Fi status and verify exactly how their pickup arrangements work. Do not assume anything will just work out.
Hearing about Trap 3 being stranded without cash or a signal on a rugged island sounds like a very quick way to feel extremely vulnerable, which naturally raises a massive question for anyone planning a trip. How safe is this island, really?
Let's ground this in the data. The World Travel Index evaluates destinations globally, and they give Sumbawa a baseline safety score of 60 out of 100.
Okay, 60 out of 100 feels like a D- if we're looking at a report card. How do we contextualize that number on the ground?
A 60 means that daytime safety is considered quite good. You can walk through the markets and towns during the day without feeling threatened. Nighttime safety, however, drops to okay and requires active situational awareness.
So it's not super dangerous.
The risk of being targeted by a sophisticated scam is very low, but the risk of opportunistic theft is moderate.
Practically speaking, what does that mean for your daily habits? It means you don't need to walk around in a state of paranoia, but you absolutely need to employ common sense. When you are riding a rented scooter, keep your phone secured inside a zipped bag or deep in your pocket. Do not leave it loosely mounted on the handlebars where someone driving past can snatch it.
Good advice.
Avoid traveling long distances between rural towns at night. because the roads are dark, isolated, and often share space with livestock. And if you are surfing, do not leave a backpack full of cash and electronics unattended on the sand.
We also need to specifically address solo female travelers.
The consensus from the sources is that the main hubs, like Sumbawa Besar, are generally safe, low-key, and perfectly walkable during the daylight hours. But the strict advice is to avoid improvising your transport at night. Do not try to hail a random scooter ride from a stranger on a dark road.
No, base yourself somewhere solid.
If you're traveling solo, your best strategy is to anchor yourself at a reputable established surf lodge or a professional dive resort where the staff actively manages a trusted transport network. Places like Lakey Peak are recommended because they offer tight social clusters where you can meet other travelers and move around in groups.
And when we pivot the safety conversation from solo travelers to families, the definition of danger completely changes. The real danger for a family in Sumbawa isn't violent crime or theft.
No, the real family risk is entirely environmental and logistical. It is the crushing, inescapable midday heat. It is the severe road fatigue that comes from sitting in a bouncing car for 4 hours on a potholed mountain pass.
And the food?
It is the food inflexibility. When you are at a remote warung, your kids refuse to eat spicy local fish, and there is no supermarket to fall back on. And above all, it is the severely limited medical access outside of the main cities. I said it before, but I will repeat it. Do not test a child's midnight fever on a remote volcanic mountain 2 hours away from a clinic that might only have basic supplies. It is simply not worth the stress.
You also mentioned earlier that the risk of outright scams is low, but we need to clarify that friction still absolutely exists around money.
Right. You aren't going to encounter the sophisticated organized tour scams you might find in heavily touristed European cities. The issue here is unclear pricing. If you toss your bags into a private car or hand your surfboard to a guy with a small motorized canoe and you haven't explicitly agreed on a price before you move, you are going to arrive at your destination and end up in a frustrating, tense argument over the cost.
Get it in writing.
To avoid that friction, you have to agree on the transport and baggage prices up front and ideally have it written down on a piece of paper or in a text message.
So we've spent a massive amount of time outlining the hurdles. We've covered the intense heat, the grueling logistical friction, the cash traps, the long dirt roads, and the total lack of modern convenience. This raises the most important question of the entire deep dive. What is the payoff? Why would anyone voluntarily put themselves through this?
Because when the island delivers, it delivers experiences you cannot buy in Bali. Let's get into the good stuff. Let's look at the best moments and, because we promise honesty, the honest disappointments. Let's start with wildlife, specifically Saleh Bay.
Saleh Bay is arguably one of the premier draws of the entire island, if not the entire region, because it offers year-round access to whale sharks. These animals are massive, they're gentle, and being in the water with them, away from a crowd of 50 other tourist boats, is a profound, life-altering experience.
But the sources explicitly demand that we do some ethical due diligence here. You cannot just jump on the cheapest wooden boat you find at the docks. You have to ask questions about how the encounter is operated. Is the boat captain responsible? Are they keeping a safe distance? Or are they crowding and harassing the animals just to get you a good photo?
You have to police the ethics yourself.
And we also have to be honest about the nature of the experience. It is a marine gamble. Nature does not run on a theme park schedule. It is never a guaranteed payoff. You might endure a 3-hour boat ride, the weather might turn, and you might not see a single fin.
For surfers, however, the payoff is almost unquestionable. The breaks down at Lakey Peak and Huyu are world-class. They draw dedicated surfers from all over the globe who stay for weeks or months at a time. Properties like Lakey Peak Haven offer this perfectly enclosed, tailored retreat where everything is built around the rhythm of the tides.
But here is the honest disappointment for that region. It is a monoculture. If you are traveling as a couple, and one of you plans to surf for 6 hours a day, but the other one doesn't surf at all, that tiny village is going to feel incredibly narrow and claustrophobic very quickly for the non-surf partner. There are no boutique shopping streets to wander down. There are no lush yoga retreats to kill time in. You are sitting on a hot beach watching someone else have fun.
For the mountain and history enthusiasts, the ultimate payoff is Mount Tambora. It is a massive volcanic caldera with an incredible dark history. Its eruption in 1815 literally altered global weather patterns. Standing on the rim is a bucket list achievement.
The honest disappointment with Tambora. It requires intense, dedicated logistical planning and extreme physical stamina. It is a major undertaking. It is not a casual side quest you decide to tackle on a Tuesday afternoon because you are bored of sitting by the pool. It requires guides, permits, proper gear, and days of your time.
Finally, we have the comfort and island within an island seekers. Their ultimate payoff is Moyo Island. If you secure a stay at the Moyo Island Resort, you are granted beachfront access to pristine, untouched reefs, incredible diving, and access to stunning inland waterfalls. It is the postcard definition of an exotic escape.
That disappointment. It is highly specialized, and it is eye-wateringly expensive compared to the rest of the island. Getting to Moyo requires specific, often private, boat transfers. You cannot just spontaneously decide to pop over to Moyo for the afternoon. It is a primary destination that requires a dedicated, substantial budget.
If we synthesize all these moments, the highs and the lows, the ultimate reality check is this. The beautiful drone videos you see online completely hide the massive, exhausting distances between these locations. The glowing 5-star reviews of the surf camps vastly understate the amount of cash planning and sheer transit stamina required to reach the front desk. But if you fully accept those harsh terms, the absolute lack of crowding and the deeply authentic, unpolished local feel are incredibly rewarding.
But what if a listener has made it this far into the deep dive, they've heard about the 6-hour drives and the lack of ATMs, and they're thinking, you know what, I work 50 weeks a year. This sounds like way too much work for a vacation. What are the bailout options? Where do they go instead? Let's look at the alternatives.
Alternative number 1 is the most obvious. We'll just go back to Lombok. Lombok is exponentially easier. Because of that Mandalika development money we discussed, it has much stronger, more resilient infrastructure. It has significantly better air connectivity. It is a fantastic, highly rational choice for a simpler, more predictable beach trip where you want a hint of adventure during the day, but you absolutely want a reliable, high-quality restaurant with a wine list at night.
The downside of choosing Lombok. It is a terrible choice if you truly desire raw, untouched frontier travel. Lombok is actively being processed and paved for mass tourism. And if we look at the economics, while the nightly hotel rates on Lombok might appear higher than the 22 levels on Sumbawa, the ease and cheapness of the transport balance the budget out. You aren't wasting hundreds of dollars hiring private cross-island drivers just to see a waterfall.
Alternative number 2 pushes you in the opposite direction. Keep going east to Flores.
Flores is the superior choice if your ultimate travel dream revolves around seeing the Komodo National Park, doing multi-day live-aboard island-hopping boat trips, and witnessing that dramatic, Jurassic-looking eastern scenery.
The crucial shift here is the infrastructure. Over the last few years, Flores has developed incredibly strong air links directly into Labu and Bajo. That airport expansion makes accessing the Komodo dragons and the marine park incredibly easy compared to the old backpacker days when you had to endure the grueling overland route all the way across Sumbawa just to catch a rusty ferry from Saipai to Flores. You can just fly over the friction now.
So if someone is sitting on the fence right now, staring at a map, wavering between these Indonesia islands, what is the tiebreaker?
It ultimately comes down to your primary uncompromising desire. Choose Flores if your ultimate goal is the Komodo dragons and stepping onto established, well-oiled, multi-day boat routes. Choose Sumbawa only if you possess deep patience, you specifically desire low-density, world-class surf, and you are willing to gamble your time to chase the whale sharks.
All right, it's time for the final verdict. We're going to rapidly score the traveler types based on everything we've audited today in the Is It Worth It matrix. I'll read a persona, you give me the score and the justification. Let's start with the backpacker.
I give Sumbawa a very strong 8 out of 10 for backpackers. It is absolutely worth it, but the critical caveat is that you must have the luxury of time. If you can stretch your schedule, live on that $30 to $45 a day budget, utilize those cheap $18 rooms, endure the slow ferries, and eat at the local markets, it is an adventurer's dream.
But skip it if.
However, you must skip it entirely if your definition of backpacking requires vibrant party hostels, pub crawls, and a dense social scene. None of that exists here.
Next persona, the mid-range traveler.
7 out of 10. It is worth it, provided you pre-plan meticulously and, crucially, you are willing to spend your money on private transfers to save yourself from wasted travel days. You need to confidently budget $70 to $120 per person per day. Skip it if you expect a high density of polished, aesthetic restaurants within easy walking distance of your mid-tier hotel. 5 out of 10. I am grading on a curve here. It is worth it only for families traveling with robust, older teenagers, and only if you are willing to pay a premium for private, air-conditioned transport every step of the way. You must budget $180 to $320 a day to buy that reliability.
And who should skip it?
You absolutely must skip Sumbawa if you are traveling with toddlers, or if anyone in your family has a condition that requires immediate, reliable medical access. The infrastructure simply cannot guarantee your safety.
The luxury traveler.
6 out of 10. It is worth it strictly for remote nature immersion and high-end diving, where you are spending $250 to $500 plus a day at specialist enclosed eco resorts. But you must skip it if your personal definition of luxury requires international brand consistency, high-end shopping boutiques, and 24-hour white glove concierges. You are paying for exclusive nature, not exclusive service.
Finally, the digital nomad.
6 out of 10. It is worth it only if you are a completely self-contained worker and you specifically, intentionally book a property like Lakey Peak Haven that explicitly guarantees Starlink connectivity. You need to budget $900 to $1,600 a month. Skip it entirely if your remote work lifestyle relies on dropping into modern co-working spaces and attending networking events with other expats. You will be very lonely.
So, synthesizing all of that, the overall verdict is clear. Sumbawa is a very strong 2026 and 2027 post-Bali alternative.
Yeah.
But only if you fully buy into the logistical friction before you ever buy the flight.
And looking at that friction raises a final provocative thought that I think every traveler tuning in needs to ponder before they book their next trip. It is the ultimate paradox of modern travel.
What's that?
We desperately seek out these untouched places like Sumbawa. We want to escape the crowds, the traffic, and the concrete of the mega resorts. But the very moment we arrive on that empty beach, we immediately demand the medical access, the fast Wi-Fi, the diverse menus, and the cheap, seamless transport that we are used to back home.
We want it all.
And by demanding those conveniences, we force those wild places to pave over their culture and become the exact concrete resorts we were trying to run away from. The question isn't whether Sumbawa is ready for us. The question is, can we actually learn to love the friction, or are we just demanding that the frontier adapt to our comfort?
If this gave you the honest verdict you needed, follow the show. New episodes drop every day.
That is the honest verdict from Phil and H.